Most people think they earn money, but what they're actually doing is renting out their time, hour by hour, day by day. And when the time stops, so does the income. This is the foundation of labor. You are paid for presence, for showing up, for performing tasks, for producing output in real time. Nothing carries forward. Owners operate differently. They are not paid for time. They are paid for what time produces. Systems, assets, structures that continue working without constant input. So while one person's income resets every day, the other person's income continues, even when they are not actively working. That is the quiet divide. It doesn't look dramatic. There's no obvious line separating the two. Both are working, both are active. But the nature of their work is different. One is tied directly to effort. The other is tied to ownership. And ownership changes how time behaves. Because once something is owned, it can produce repeatedly. A worker must return to earn again. An owner can continue earning from what already exists. That is where the separation begins. Not in how hard someone works, but in what their work becomes. Does it end when they stop, or does it continue? This is why effort alone doesn't explain outcomes, because effort without ownership resets. It cannot accumulate. Ownership allows accumulation. It allows past effort to remain active, to keep producing, to keep building on itself. And over time, that difference compounds, quietly, consistently, without needing to be visible. So the divide is not loud. It's not announced. It's structural, built into how income is generated. One side exchanges time. The other controls what time produces. And control is what separates them.
Workers sell output in segments: an hour, a shift, a week. The structure is simple. Time is exchanged, compensation is received. The cycle repeats. This creates a life that depends on continuity of effort. If work stops, income slows. If work disappears, income disappears with it. There is no distance between labor and payment. They are directly attached. Ownership breaks that attachment, not because owners never work, but because their work is connected to something larger than the moment, something they control, something that remains, something that can continue producing after the original effort is finished. That is the first real shift. A worker is compensated for participation. An owner is compensated for control. Control of the asset, control of the system, control of the structure people move through. And control changes where value flows. When you control the structure, you are no longer limited to what your own hands can do in a day. Other people's labor moves through it. Customers move through it. Transactions move through it. And each of those movements can generate value back to you. This is why the owner-worker divide is not really about status. It is about position inside the system. Are you inside the machine as labor, or are you above the machine as control? Those are two different economic roles. The worker helps the structure function. The owner benefits from the structure functioning. Both may be necessary, but they are not rewarded the same way. A worker's reward is usually capped by time, energy, and availability. There are only so many hours to sell, only so much output one person can create directly. Even high income within labor is still bounded, because the model remains the same. Ownership has a different ceiling, because ownership scales through volume, systems, and repetition.
If the asset grows, the return can grow. If more people move through the structure, the return can grow again. The owner does not need to multiply their own hours to multiply outcomes. This is where people often miss the divide. They compare income numbers but ignore the mechanism behind them. A worker making more money than another worker can still be trapped in the same model. Higher pay does not automatically change the structure, because if income still depends on continued labor, the dependency remains, the pressure remains, the reset remains, the vulnerability remains. Only the size of the paycheck changed. Ownership changes the model itself. It introduces persistence. Value can continue moving even when effort is reduced. Returns can continue arriving after the original work is complete. And once persistence exists, compounding becomes possible. That is why owners and workers can exist in the same economy and experience completely different realities. One is focused on maintaining income. The other is focused on expanding what generates income. One protects time. The other accumulates structures. Over time, this becomes more than a financial difference. It becomes a difference in pressure. The worker lives closer to interruption. If something stops, the flow stops. The owner lives closer to continuation. If the structure holds, the flow continues. And that is why the divide stays quiet. Because both sides can look busy, both sides can look productive. But one is producing to get paid. The other is building what gets paid. That difference is easy to miss when you only look at effort. It becomes obvious when you look at control. Who owns the system? Who benefits from repetition? Who gets paid again without starting from zero? Those questions reveal the real divide.
Pause for a second. If you're still listening, it's probably because this didn't feel exaggerated. That's intentional. If this way of thinking matters to you, like the video, subscribe. We'll keep going deeper. At first, the difference between a worker and an owner is not visible. Both wake up, both work, both produce. From the outside, they look the same. But over time, their paths begin to separate. Not because one works harder, but because their roles inside the system are different. The worker stays inside the process. They contribute to output. They keep the system running. But they do not control what happens beyond their role. The owner steps outside the process. They design it. They control it. They benefit from everything that flows through it. And that control creates leverage. Because once you control the structure, you don't need to participate in every part of it. The system runs. People move through it. Value is created. And a portion of that value returns to you. This is where scaling begins. A worker scales by increasing effort, more hours, more output, more energy. But effort has limits. An owner scales by expanding the system. More people, more transactions, more volume moving through the same structure. And that scale is not tied to personal time. So over time, the difference grows. Not suddenly, not in a way that draws attention, but consistently. Because one person is limited by capacity and the other is expanded by structure. Capacity stays fixed. Structure can grow. This is why effort alone cannot close the gap, because effort does not change position. It only increases output within the same role. To change outcomes, the role itself has to change, from participant to controller, from labor to ownership. And that shift is not just financial, it's structural. It changes how value flows to you. Because once you move into ownership, you are no longer paid only for what you do.
You are paid for what the system does, and the system can do more than any single person. That is where the real separation forms, not in effort, not in intelligence, but in position relative to control. And once that position is established, it begins to reinforce itself. More control leads to more opportunity. More opportunity leads to more expansion. And expansion leads to more control again. A loop forms, one that grows quietly, consistently, without needing to be seen. Meanwhile, the worker remains inside the loop of effort. Work, earn, reset. Work, earn, reset. And over time, those two loops move further apart, not by force, but by design. Because the system does not reward activity equally, it rewards control differently than participation. And that difference compounds.
At a certain point, the difference stops feeling small. It stops looking like a slight advantage and starts looking like two completely different paths. One person is still tied to effort. Every result depends on what they do today. Every outcome resets tomorrow. The other is no longer operating like that. Their past actions are still active, still producing, still compounding. And that changes everything. Because once effort begins to persist, time starts working differently for you. It no longer measures what you do, it multiplies what you've built. This is where the divide becomes permanent, not because it can't be closed, but because most people never change position. They try to catch up using the same model. More effort, more hours, more pressure, but the structure stays the same. And structure is what determines outcome, not intensity, not intention. So the gap continues to expand, quietly, consistently, without needing to be seen. Because one person is building something that continues, while the other is repeating something that ends. And over time, continuation always outpaces repetition. This is why the divide exists, not as a moment, but as a system. And once you see it clearly, you stop focusing on doing more and start focusing on what continues, what remains, what compounds. Because in the end, the people ahead are not ahead because they worked more. They're ahead because what they built never stopped working. And that is what time protects. If this changed how you see the system, subscribe. Like this if it shifted your perspective.